I'm Dave Ebersold. I'm facilitator. We are focused on three things tonight. Continuing to talk about water rates, and that's where we're going to spend most of the time. Really take a deep dive into that, picking up on where we left off in our last conversation. As soon as we're done with that, we'll review and accept the meeting notes from our last meeting, and then, as always, the opportunity for updates on BWS from the manager. So get all your hard questions for him ready now, write them down so you don't forget them, all the things you always wanted to know but were never afraid to ask, all that stuff, right? Okay, opportunity for public comment on our agenda. John.
I'm going to do what Kimiona Kane did in the Waimanalo neighborhood board meeting. I'm going to bring up little fire ants. We are at such a critical point on Oahu with the extent of the infestation that it's something we all have to be aware of. We all have to step up to. It's our collective kuleana to address this, and with all of the interest that Board of Water Supply and all of us have in terms of watershed management and so on, critical issue. I was telling Michelle Harmon that I was listening to a video where she was talking about this, and maybe we can touch on this before the meeting is out.
Sounds good.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Remind me if we have time and I don't get to it.
I will.
Thank you. Okay, water rates. So I wanted to recap from our discussion last time, right? It was 3 months ago. We explored together concepts of efficient indoor water use. And I think one of the things that came out of that was, from working through that exercise, I think you found that a single family residence with, say, 10 people could reasonably use not more than about 15,000 gallons of water per month, or even less than that, right? And we talked about that in the context of where the usage tiers are set. The top usage tier being more than 30,000 gallons per month. So that's where tier 4 is at 30,000. So keep that in mind as we go through some discussions today. So again, a single family residence with, say, 10 people, well below that top tier of water usage. We talked about days working capital. That's the amount of cash on hand that the board keeps to be able to respond to unforeseen conditions. And we talked about some different scenarios there. We're going to spend more time on that. As I recall, one of the scenarios we showed had some pretty low days working capital, maybe down around 9 or something like that. And there was some discomfort with that and a suggestion that a minimum should be at least a payroll period. So we're going to come back to that. And then we discussed the potential for non-uniform rate increases within the residential customer sector. That's where we have tiered water rates, and the potential of maybe keeping the increases lower for that essential needs tier and shifting it more of the increase to the higher usage tiers. We're going to come back to that. But that's a recap on what we talked about last time. Any questions before I go on? So what's been going on since our last meeting? The board has been up to a lot of stuff around water rates. And there has been a continuation of our evaluation of the different rate alternatives and a review of what those are, specifically with regard to customer impacts. We provided a water rates update to the BWS board in June, and also at the June meeting, the board voted to form a permitted interaction group, a subset of the board below a quorum, to be able to get together and talk specifically about water rates issues. We are expecting to begin seeking public input this month on a specific water rates proposal that you're going to see tonight, and I would encourage any questions you have specific to what's being planned on public outreach. Kathleen's here, and I know she's eager to share any of that and answer any questions with you. There are community information meetings already scheduled for August. I'll show you what those dates are, and I hope that y'all will come out and participate in those. And I will say that the exact proposal is still being refined, and people's input to that proposal is really important, and your input tonight is a critical part of that process. As you know from our past meetings, past discussions, the BWS board cares about what you think. They listen to what you ask, the questions you ask, the perspectives and opinions you bring. We report back to the board on what we hear, and they give that very strong consideration. So keep that in mind as we go forward. So our objectives for today, we want to review the factors that have resulted in the current financial conditions. We talked about this some at our last meeting, but I want to refresh on it. Then we want to discuss some rate design guideposts. And in particular, we're talking about should there be a minimum or a maximum rate increase in any given year? If so, what might that look like? Should there be a minimum days working capital that we never drop below? Should we consider lower increases for the essential needs tier than the other tiers? And then let's talk through a specific rate proposal. So that's our plan. Sound good? So as you remember, I've shown this slide before, and this really is showing that there was a big change with the onset of the global pandemic. There was a big change in customers' water usage patterns. Before the pandemic, single-family residential and non-residential, those are the top two lines, used about the same amount of water as a percentage of the total consumption. And when the island's tourism-driven economy shut down, that non-residential water usage dropped sharply, as we would expect, and single-family residential usage rose as more people were staying home, taking the place. So a big shift in water use patterns. The good news is that those things are starting to converge back to normal conditions, but they're still not quite back to where they were. And that global pandemic started into motion a whole bunch of other things that have really impacted all of us, right? Whether it's our business, us individually, and certainly the Board of Water is no different. One of those is inflation, right? Now inflation has gone up pretty fast. We've all been experiencing that. And the cumulative inflation rate of about 20% or so has significantly outpaced the rate that BWS's water rates have gone up, which is only about 12.5%. So there's a loss in purchasing power, right? It costs more to get the same amount of stuff done. And we all face that. And the board is no different in facing that. But it's a very real and significant impact. And unfortunately, it creates upward pressure on water rates, right? Power costs have been trending sharply upwards. So if you look at the top line, the purple line, that's the BWS's power consumption. And the good news is through their efforts at power conservation, at the implementation of their energy savings performance contract, other methods, their power consumption's been dropping. It's on a nice downward trend. But the middle line, the green line, is the cost per kilowatt hour for that power that they buy, and that's about tripled over the period from July of 2020 to current. And as a result, the total amount paid for power continues to go up. In fact, in 2023, it was about $33 million or $5.5 million more than had been planned, about 20% more. Pretty significant numbers there. And of course, we talk about Red Hill and the impact that that has had on the board's sources, the need to find new sources that are outside the area of impact from Red Hill contamination, that provide a safe, dependable water supply. There's the need to replace about 17.5 million gallons per day of production. The board is in the process of locating monitoring wells to understand the extent of that contamination, exploratory wells associated with places to put new wells, and it's as yet undetermined what the full impact of this, whether we're talking about costs, impacts to operations, and certainly the ability to recover these expenses from the Navy is as yet undetermined. The board is aggressively pursuing reimbursement and has requested assistance from the congressional delegation, but again, these things are still uncertain. And given that uncertainty, you can't count on that money being there. You have to assume in the rate making process that you're not going to get that reimbursement, right? You can't count on money that doesn't exist. For those of you who follow national news on water issues, you've probably been seeing about PFAS, forever chemicals, right? And this is an emerging contaminant. BWS has detected it in 8 sources thus far, all below the proposed maximum contaminant levels that are being currently proposed by, by EPA. PFAS is common in many products that we all use throughout our homes. It's been in widespread usage since the 1940s. You can thank PFAS for your nonstick cookware, your waterproof clothing, the fast food wrappers that the cheese doesn't stick to. All those things, thank PFAS for that. But unfortunately, it's now in our water supply too. And this is a nationwide problem, and it has as yet undetermined impacts. So want to be aware of it. It's a trend and risk that we need to be cognizant of as we look forward. So in response to all of this, BWS has worked hard to tighten its belt, right? Several years ago, a series of rate increases were approved. BWS has held to those already approved rate increases. The operations and maintenance budget that the board approved for 2024, this current fiscal year that we're in, is nearly flat, just a 0.2% increase. That's virtually nothing, especially when we think about inflationary rates being much higher than that, right? They've chosen not to implement what's called the energy cost adjustment factor. They have the ability to pass on increases in energy costs if they're higher than what was anticipated to try and maintain affordability. That hasn't been exercised at this point. And they've deferred the purchases of equipment, replacement vehicles, non-critical things as best as possible. There's also been the deferral of less critical capital projects, such as some pipeline replacements, out into the future to try and make do with the resources that are available now. Any questions on any of those things? So there's also been an awful lot that's been accomplished with the last round of rate increases that were enacted. And over the period of 2018 to 23, BWS is underway on nearly 500 capital projects, things including pipeline replacements, that was interesting, pump and valve repairs, planning and replacements, facility repairs, and of course, you've heard in various meetings the completion of the planning efforts for the Kalealoa seawater desalination facility, which is now moving into design and construction. As I said, about 500 projects, and in total, this has resulted in the expenditure of about $770 million on these different capital projects. So, making really great use of the rate increases that were implemented under, with your recommendations last time around. So that's kind of the background of how we've gotten to today. Any questions before I go on about any of those things? Cynthia.
Just a quick one. The Kalealoa desal plant is for how large?
So it's 1.7 to start. And the reason we're going small first is we're going to be taking desalinated seawater and have to blend it in a water system in the pipes that only is seeing groundwater from wells. And that's going to be very challenging and tricky to do that without creating problems for our customers. So we're going to start small, but the intent is to expand it in the future to 5 MGD, perhaps even more, depending on what happens with climate change in the future. Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? So let's go on then to talk about some rate design guideposts. And what I want to do is walk through some illustrations of things, take the time to dig into it, get your input on it. These become pretty important questions. I also want to share with you the input received so far from the Permitted Interaction Group, see what you all think about that, and let's just talk through stuff, okay? Okay, so the working capital we've talked about in the past, and this is money that the board keeps on hand, working capital, to be able to respond to unplanned events, right? A natural disaster, an increase in energy costs, an unexpected project, an unexpected operational expense. And the objective in the policy, which you all provided a lot of input to in our last iteration of this, was to target 180 days working capital. And if you recall, a lot of that impetus for a number of 180 came from looking at the impacts of natural disasters in other similar locations and what kind of resources it might be prudent to have on hand to be able to recover. So that's where that 180 days came from. The target was to get there gradually over time, about a 10-year period, and then to always maintain a minimum of 60 days cash on hand, okay? Any questions about that? So here's an illustration of a concept, okay? And what I wanted to show at the top is, now I'm going to show a couple different examples of this one and then another one. And they both buy the same amount of stuff, meaning they both support the same capital improvement program. They both support the same level of operations. They have all those same expenses in them. So everything's equal. The only thing we're changing here is how to spread out the rate increases, which are shown up across the top. So in this scenario, we're increasing rates on January 1st, 2024 at 14.4%. And then on July 1st of 2024, 8.6%, and then July 1st, each of the years thereafter, 5.2%. And the way that that was developed was to say, what's the minimum rate increase that we need given the CIP and the operational expenses to get to 60 days working capital? And the answer in this instance was, well, we need 14.4% to get to 60 days. And then we said, and what increase do we need to maintain 60 days in the next year? And that ends up being 8.6%. And then we said, and if we did even rate increases in the other years, what does that number need to be to make sure that we're at least 60 days at the end of the rate setting period? So that's how we got there. And so that results in a cumulative rate increase over this period of time of 52.5%. So you can see that we go above 80 days working capital there in the middle, but we end it back down at that 60 minimum. If we cut those numbers down, like 5.2 in fiscal year 26, if we dropped it lower to get down to 80 days, we'd have to raise rates more in the later years to get back to 60. So it's just a trade-off of when that money's coming in and trying to keep the rate increases as level as possible, not have them jump around every year. Making sense so far? Well, then the question becomes, 14.4% seems like kind of a big number. So what if let's pick an arbitrary number, 10%, and say, what if we tried to limit our increase to not more than 10%? And this example I'm going to show you is doing just that. So if you look in the first year, right, it's 9.9%, let's call it 10. That's what it is. So we've dropped the increase from 14.4 down to 9.9, and then the next year was at 9.9. And what happened when we did that? Well, we dropped below 60 days working capital. Right? We dropped down to 50 in the first period and 45 days in the second period. And then we structured the increases thereafter at 7.1, 6.2, 7.4, 5 to get us exactly at that 60 days working capital. And the cumulative increase in this scenario is about the same as it was in the other one. You know, it's a couple of points higher, but really we're just trading off the timing in these payments. Overall, it's about the same amount of total money coming in over the period of time, but we get this little bit of benefit on the affordability side at the front end in dropping below that 60-day minimum. So far, so good. Well, what does that actually mean in terms of somebody's water bill? And this is looking at, remember that the average water bill for a BWS single-family residential customer, on average, they use 9,000 gallons a month of water per month. So basing a bill on that average usage, they currently pay just under $60 a month, $59.56. Under that first alternative, January 1st, 2024, it would go up to $68.11, and then $73.98, and so on. And in fiscal year 29, it would be $90.73. Again, that cumulative increase is 52.3%. If we implement that, hey, let's try and hold that increase down a little bit, recognizing that we're going to drop below the 60 days working capital, we get some benefit of lowering that bill amount by a couple dollars a month, right? Not insignificant. And then when we look at the end of the period, the bill's a couple dollars a month higher out on the back end. And again, the cumulative rate increases are within a couple points of each other at the end of the day. So let me pause and ask you what your thoughts are about that issue of, one, dropping below 60 days working capital to try and maintain affordability, and two, should we think about a maximum increase in any given year in an effort to support affordability? Yeah, Dean.
The first scenario seems like no matter, I mean, it might be a steeper increase at the beginning end, but seems like a better value in the long run. And truthfully, do you want to go below 60 days at all at any point in time? Because, you know, the unpredictability of what's going on in the world today, you know, it's like, it's a gamble, right? So I would prefer the first scenario.
Cynthia.
I guess I'm in agreement with Dean. The thing that concerns me is we just missed a hurricane, tropical storm, whatever you want to call it, what was happening. But we've also had a couple of years of La Nina, and we're going into an El Nino, and they're saying that this is going to be a strong one. So I get a little bit nervous if we don't have a little extra in our pockets somewhere to be able to compensate in case it's needed. And, you know, we all hope that we never need it, but I'm just a little bit nervous about the unpredictability, especially of the various climate effects that are going on today. I mean, if you'd have asked me even 10 years ago, would I see Arizona or Phoenix with almost a month above 110-degree temperature every day, I'd say, yeah, you gotta be kidding. Because I lived in Tucson, so I've been in that kind of climate. But considering what we're seeing today, do we want to put ourselves on that edge? I think that's the question that we really have to debate for the population of the island. And personally, I would say I'd rather be a little bit safer than sorry and say, oops, by the way, Board of Water Supply, you don't have enough money to operate therefore we're gonna impact one community or another. I'm not for that.
Okay. Other thoughts? Yeah, Helen?
I really applaud the Board of Water Supply in trying to justify rate increases. Yeah, you're really trying really hard to convince us that the increases that you feel are necessary are justified. But I agree with Cynthia. This is coming, and it is going to be unbelievably harder. Yeah, and people use water very, very wastefully. I use a plumber, and he's a single businessman. And I think that you should ask some of these small business plumbers to have a little committee meeting with you people. And he said to me, he said, forget about it. The vast majority of people, they don't think responsibly about how they waste water. He said they are wasteful and they don't care. And he said you have to be more strict about it if you want to really, affect behavioral change. And people are used to rate changes because, I was just shocked. Zippy's is selling oxtail soup for $27 a bowl. That's Zippy's. So the Board of Water Supply, just trying to justify all this very, very reasonable rates, I think I would like to make sure that they don't stay too close to the margins. I'd rather see more security.
It's a great fundraiser for Key Project, John. You could do oxtail soup for like $10 a bowl. What do you think?
The price of beef is going up. I agree. I think, if ever there was a time for putting this out there, it's now with the awareness, the level of awareness about things like Red Hill and everything else. I think those who are thinking in the public are definitely gonna accept it. So I would stick with it first. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yeah.
As you folks looked at these rate adjustments and the timing thereof, have you guys looked at it in the context of the state of the economy? Right now the economy is not, really robust and so forth, and a lot of families, I'm sure, are kind of hurting. So I'm not against the rate adjustments. I'm just kind of wondering, has that been taken into account as well?
Yeah, and that's exactly the balance that we're talking about here, right? Is what do you do to try and, you're hitting the nail on the head. What do you try and do to help with affordability, right? And what do you give up in exchange for that? That's exactly the conversation. So I'm glad you brought that up, and it's going to come up again as we continue our conversation tonight.
So the Board of Water Supply's mission is to provide safe, dependable, and affordable water now and into the future for our community, because all life depends on water on this island. So the issue for us is this balancing act, and we used to have a slide, and that was like on one side you'd have safe, dependable water.
We still have it.
And we still do?
We still,
okay,
it's
good.
coming up.
It's coming up. And the other side is affordability. And that's something that we take very seriously when we think about these rate increases, because we are also thinking about folks on limited incomes that are just barely making it right now. And they're probably on the smaller water user than the larger water user. The majority of our customers are single-family residential customers. So that's something we really struggle with. But thank you, Kellen.
Arnie, did you want to talk at all about, I think one of the questions that came up was, why ever consider going below 60 days working capital? And my question is, did you want to talk a little bit about the other tools available to help the board in situations that make it even a point of discussion that you're willing to consider dropping below 60?
So the working capital fund, and that was actually, I think, a suggestion of the Stakeholder Advisory Group many years ago, to actually have this kind of a reserve, because prior to that, we never had anything like that or a board policy. So setting at 60 days as the minimum, 180 days as the top end. And we actually had Dave and his team from CDM look around the country at different utilities and what their practices are. And it seemed like between that 60 and 180 days was very reasonable. One thing I want to be clear too, if we got hit by a hurricane, we would put all of whatever we have in the working capital. I think right now we have over 60 days there. Is that the number right now, Joe? Looking like maybe a number of days of working
Yeah, we
capital.
have over 60 days right now.
We would use all of that because if there was a direct hit of a hurricane, we would basically suspend billing of our customers. Imagine all thousands of homes destroyed or heavily damaged, people unable to live in those homes like they would. So, and the streets and roads cluttered with debris from the hurricane. No way I can have my meter readers go out there. And then where do we send the bill to? If your home is destroyed, you won't be there anymore. So we're gonna have to suspend billing and live off our reserves. So working capital is one area we would tap. The other area is existing contracts that are already in place. We look at maybe the ones that are less critical to either canceling those contracts and taking the money and using it. So same thing with CIP projects that are underway, that we would look at which ones are less critical. Can we suspend or cancel those projects, grab those funds and use it to operate and rebuild the water system. So those are some of the other avenues. We also have insurance. Property damage, property insurance to cover about $60 million, I think, of damages. We have a big deductible. It's like is it $1 million now, our deductible? If you look at your homeowner's hurricane insurance, you'll see your premiums are going like crazy. Same thing for the Board of Water Supply. But that insurance, the other program is, if there was a major disaster like Iniki, but on Oahu, and we saw those that are around when Iniki happened, you saw the devastation. FEMA, the president would probably declare an emergency, and that would really bring in FEMA, or Federal Emergency Management Agency funding. And they have a program called the Public Assistance Program. We would apply for those funds and seek those funds to reimburse us for the repairs of our facilities. So I just want to make sure it's clear. Working capital is one important component, but we have other tools, but those other tools require trade-offs, basically sacrificing something to free up the money to use for the emergency.
Yeah.
The priority would be response and recovery of this island and restoring critical water service island-wide. It's critical to our recovery as an island, as a community, and as a state. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ernie. I think that that other perspective, I hope, is helpful in thinking about why is there even consideration to go below 60.
But I do appreciate, and our Stakeholder Advisory Group, which has been around now for, is it 8 years?
Since 2015.
Oh gosh, 8 years, 47 meetings. Your understanding and support for the board for charging rates. And I know that rates, increasing water rates, or rates on any kind of charge or anything is not a popular thing. But I guess the thing we're trying to convey, and I appreciate your support here too, it's necessary because we need to keep this critical infrastructure maintained and operating and able to meet the needs of current and future generations. We can't do that if we don't continue to generate more revenue to invest into this critical infrastructure and also into the water resources itself. Protection of the water resources, looking for alternative sources of supply, We're 100% dependent on groundwater right now. We need to diversify because climate change, it is scary to see what's happening in California, from extreme drought to extreme flooding and rain and flooding. The temperatures in June globally were some of the highest on record. So we are headed down a path. We don't even know what the final destination will look like, but it is time to prepare. Thank you.
All right, good discussion around this. Let me share with you the guideposts suggested by the Permitted Interaction Group. Their input was an overall revenue increase not to exceed 10% in any given year, and never less than 45 days working capital. I will say there was some discomfort at dropping below 60, but never less than 45, and don't stay down there very long. So, any comments or thoughts about that?
I feel like the others, you know, I mean, if I'm looking at a $6 rate hike or an $8 or $9 rate hike in the first year, $8 or $9 doesn't seem like that much more, and then you even out pretty quickly after that in the two comparisons. And if that's, you know, what it takes to keep us at 60, 45 days seems scary, even with the alternatives, you know, or the additional things that Ernie just mentioned.
And I'm correct in assuming that the rest of you that expressed that opinion, even after Ernie's additional things, still feel the same way? Okay.
Dave, you know, this is an opportunity to really, like Helen said, people are pretty wasteful with water. They're not, and I think this is the time to be talking about how to conserve more, and you know, everything from water catchments and really understanding the difference between potable and non-potable water uses and so on. So, you know, those are things that the public can do, that businesses can do, and now's the time to be planning for that. So I would add that in.
Great. Thank you, John. Okay. Good discussion. I want to move on to then, let's talk about the capital improvement program in a little more detail. And I'm hoping that you remember when we did the Water Master Plan, we showed a chart that shows different types of projects and how those expenditures were going to go through the years. And so the chart on the left-hand side is what that looked like coming out of the 30-year Water Master Plan, and showing total expenditures. These are inflated dollars. So total expenditures for fiscal years 24 through 29 by project type. The brown at the top, that's pipeline repair and replacement. And remember, one of the major goals was to ramp up to 21 miles of pipeline replacement per year gradually over time. The other types of projects there are non-potable in the dark blue, storage or reservoirs in the green. The lighter blue is facilities. The yellow is sources, you know, wells, and then tools and resource development and other categories down at lower levels of spending. What we're looking at in the capital improvement program that we're using to develop this round of water rates is over on the right-hand side. And I'm going to jump into more detail on it in a second, but note the big change. There's a lot less brown, right? There's a lot less pipeline replacement in there than in the one on the left. And there's a lot more yellow, source replacement. And that's driven by a couple of things, but one of the big drivers of it is the Red Hill response. So what I wanted a couple things to point out when we look at the side-by-side comparison is the level of spending that's being proposed in the rate alternatives I'm gonna show you. The level of spending that's being proposed on capital projects is less than what was anticipated in the 30-year Water Master Plan, and a lot of the pressure on that comes from inflationary pressures and the need to invest in source replacement. Okay, So let's look at in detail what's in that capital improvement program over the next 6 years. So again, this is showing it by fiscal year, and the brown at the top, that's new and replacement pipelines. The big gold color is sources. So a lot of investment in monitoring and exploratory wells going on right now. Kalealoa Seawater Desal project moving into construction. You see big investments there. And then construction of replacement sources here after completion of the exploratory wells. At the top, pipeline replacements. Less investment in pipeline replacements overall. Not on that same trajectory to 21 miles a year that existed previously. And then a big bump in the green with some new storage reservoirs for Waiawa. Ongoing investments in the light blue in security, control systems, facility improvements, and pretty steady investments in pump renewal and replacement. And you can see over in fiscal year 24 some investment in the non-potable system. So that's what's in the 6-year CIP. That's the basis behind the rate alternatives that we're looking at. Questions or thoughts about that? Dana?
Can I just get clarification? Is that proposed or that's already decided that you're reducing the amount of pipe replacements and increasing new source discovery?
Yeah, what we're doing right now is actually trying to prioritize development of new water sources. The issues on pipeline replacements, we're going to push some of those projects into the future. We will get around to addressing them, but right now the urgency that I see in the system is we've lost 3 sources, taking about almost 10% of our supply offline. We need to find new water sources. And we're also looking at how we're pumping our existing wells. Some of the wells we're pumping, we can see a kind of what I call a negative trend in terms of the saltiness of the water. The chloride level is starting to increase. So we need to develop more wells, look for alternative supplies not dependent on groundwater, and then try to optimize how we pump from the aquifer to maintain quality. So yeah, bottom line, it's less pipelines and more source development. The initial 30-year master plan was primarily some of the other projects, non-pipeline, and then the latter years, pipeline would be the dominant type of infrastructure. But in those days, we didn't have the impacts of Red Hill. Some of these impacts, I think, we're going to see eventually of climate change. So we need to get new sources online.
So does that, you said that will come in later. So is that after this 5-year?
It would go on
horizon?
beyond. So we don't lose the projects we've identified. When we did the water master plan and completed in 2016, we evaluated the whole water system. We looked at every segment of our 2,100 miles of water mains, and we scored them and prioritized their replacement. We would just kind of slide them out into future years once we can get additional source capacity. Because Dana, I kind of look at this in a kind of a simplistic way. Pipeline replacements will help to reduce main breaks per year, and we have about 1 main break a day. I think last fiscal year it was about 353 main breaks in the year. But if I don't have enough supply or water to put in that pipeline, replacing the pipelines and not developing more supply for our future won't address our needs. So for now, it's really shifting the focus on new source development so I can have water to put in these pipes. And I'm depending on Field and Jason and his team, and they're doing a good job to be more efficient and effective at finding leaks proactively, using the satellite technology we've proven that works, and also on the repairs, doing it faster, more efficiently, and getting service restored. So they've been doing a good job. And lately we've had a large number of larger pipeline breaks, 30-inch, 42-inch, 36-inch diameter pipelines, some of the larger pipes in the system. And I must say I'm really impressed with our field operations and the crews. they're able to get them back in service and get them repaired. So that's the interim situation, and kind of a change on the water master plan approach that was planned almost 10 years ago. Times have changed. The other thing we're doing too, and I know, stop me, Dave, if I talk too much. We realize that it's time to update our water master plan. It was adopted in 2016. This is now almost 7 years later. The challenges are different. We have Red Hill, and Red Hill now we receive the aftermath and the damages. Defueling the tanks at Red Hill and the pipes is not the end of the story here. What's left behind is a legacy of fuel releases that are in the environment, that is there someplace, and they are going to continue to impact our groundwater aquifer, our groundwater resources in that area. The other issues, PFAS, emerging contaminants. PFAS contamination wasn't, it's something the EPA is going to regulate, we think, by the end of this year. And we're going to have to deal with, does that mean we have to install treatment systems to keep certain wells running? Do we need to relocate and develop other wells in other areas that doesn't have the PFAS contamination? Those are all the unknowns that we face right now. So I think from a planner standpoint, there's enough changes in conditions or challenges that really justifies that it's time to revisit our water master plan. And we're going to do that starting this year and involve all our stakeholder members in that process.
Cynthia.
I understand the need to look at other aspects of how our funds are going to be used going forward, but the reason why this group had put such a heavy emphasis on the 21 miles per year was when we first got together, BWS was replacing less than 6 miles per year of pipeline. And given 2,100 miles of pipelines, we were looking 250 years down the road before some of these lines were going to be touched. And if they weren't in the pipeline early in the schedule early enough, we were going to replace them via breakages. So if we're not ramping up to the 21 miles at this point, what are you looking at? I hope it's more than 6 miles per year, but you know, that's a big gap to go from 6 to 21. I think we all agreed to that. But then if we're going to change directions today, that 21 is now down to what, so that we can accommodate all of these other aspects?
Cynthia, I'll have to kind of look again, and I don't recall how many miles the 6-year plan that the rate study is based on, which is emphasizing more source development instead of pipeline replacement. But I'll get back to you on that. The other aspects, remember the balancing act between safe, dependable, and affordability. If we kept to the 21 miles a year, that road to 21, and that's only 1% of our total 2,100 miles. And also the emphasis on and importance of developing new water sources. If we did both together, the size of the capital program would be something that, at least in my perspective, the issue of affordability for our customers, I really struggle with this. The other thing that we are struggling with too, I think that some of you as employers may be facing, is workforce issues. Inability to fill our vacant positions for engineers, support techs, and other types of positions. You know, we are really struggling to retain and fill those vacancies. You know, I just looked at the Capital Projects Division. There's 11 engineer vacancies right now. It's a little better because it used to be 14, but we are really struggling to hire new engineers. We hire them, we've been able to hire them right out of school, but once they have 4 or 5 years of experience, we're starting to lose them to other employers that are more competitive. And that's part of the challenge. So the ability to deliver on a capital program, so that's another aspect. The other thing too right now is the cost of construction is really expensive. So we push out more, we are going to pay a premium for that. Or can we wait until inflation comes back under control and the supply chain issues are less impactful? That's another thing to consider. What we are doing for the pipelines, and I don't know the miles that we're going to be put in under the 6-year program, we change our standards for corrosion protection. So every pipeline we're putting in now, it's going to be probably a ductile iron pipe with corrosion protection systems to preserve that pipe and improve its performance and service life. And my target was 100 years. Hopefully these corrosion protection systems, which are insurance policy upon insurance policy, layers of corrosion protection on the pipelines, is something that will buy our customers longer life with less problems. We now require for ductile iron pipe something called a bonded coated pipe, a coating that is actually physically bonded to the pipe itself.
The industry hates them for this, by the way.
I had to fight the ductile iron pipe industry because their solution for corrosion control is encase the pipe in a plastic bag and then bury it. But that plastic bag doesn't perform well. So we went to bonded coatings and also cathodic protection coating systems, sacrificial anodes welded to the pipe, and each pipe connected electrically to allow for the anodes to be sacrificed before the pipe actually starts to corrode. So between the two, we hope to get that 100-year service life. So yeah, those are the things I kind of struggle with.
I'm not sure how we ended up in the details of cathodic protection, but before you step away, any other questions for Ernie about the capital improvement program?
Guy had
here?
something. Yeah.
Ernie, I know, you're trying to balance whatever dollars we have, but because of the problems that have occurred, is there any chance of them financially boosting your, boosting or providing more sources, like outside of your budget, they would infuse like cash as a, I don't know, like a settlement or what, because, truly you having to shift your budget is directly a result, for example, Red Hill. I don't know if you covered it in your speech, but I noticed all the fencing around the pump stations and the reservoirs have a different kind of fence going up, and so if that's something that's mandated by the government for safety, then is that something that's granted or funded?
Do the short answer.
Okay, I'll try to keep it short. So the fence is expanded metal mesh, and we found it more secure than chain link. Chain link is so easy to cut and get into. So expanded metal mesh provides better security for our facilities. The other thing too here, and we're talking about rates, which is revenue generated from our customers. So what we've changed the mode of operation for the Board of Water Supply. So prior to, I think, the Red Hill crisis, we were thinking, wow, we got to increase rates. We need to get the revenue that we operate the water system and maintain the infrastructure from our ratepayers. Our mode of operation going forward is we're going to continue to continuously seek outside sources of funding from the federal government or other entities, or maybe even the Hawaii Community Foundation, but philanthropic, federal dollars, grants or low-cost loan programs, and pursue outside funding. We have requests with our congressional delegation right now that's going through the budget process. Raylyn, is it for one project is about $5 million?
That's a total of 15.1 that I think is ambitious. It looks like on the house side at least, the HCF, there's about $1 million maybe coming for a waterline project. That waterline project though does have a $5 million price tag, but the $1 million in the fence would
So Guy, to answer your question, we're going to look for outside sources of funds to supplement this program. And if we can get more, like right now, we have been given about $50.3 million in federal ARPA funds, federal grant funds that we're putting to work into capital improvement projects. So we can get more outside funds. And this past session from the state legislature, it's kind of coming out of the same pocket, but not directly. They were gracious enough to allocate $10 million to the Board of Water Supply. We made a request for monitor wells because of Red Hill and a new exploratory well to develop a new water source. $10 million was granted, and we're working with the governor and his team to get those monies released. So these are outside, not coming from water ratepayers, but coming from outside. And Dana, thank you for all that information through the Community Foundation on how to look for federal funds. We need to become more skillful and look for where all those buckets of funds are in the federal government and different federal agencies and programs. So that's the mode of operation we're going forward, is looking for a diverse source of funding, not just people paying their water bills.
Great. All right, I want to move us on.
Okay. Thank you.
So, looking at that capital improvement program that we spent a bunch of time on, good questions. I'm going to show you 4 different scenarios that fully fund that capital improvement program. They also fund the operations and maintenance of the board, so those annual operations and maintenance expenses. But what I'm going to say about that, well, I'll show you the alternatives. So, this first alternative is what I call the no buffer alternative. So some elements of it. It has a 10% increase on January 1st, 2024, a 10% increase at the start of the new fiscal year, which is July 1st, 2024, and then 6.7, 6.4, 7.4, and 5% increases. The total cumulative increase is 55%. And I'm going to call it the no buffer alternative because you can see the days working capital in the first couple of years drops down to never less than 45. And the days working capital in all the other years is pegged at 60. So there's not, I say no buffer. If there's not much room for an unexpected condition that comes up, right? The next one is what I've nicknamed getting back on track. So it's the same capital improvement program, right? And here the increases are the same in the first 2 years. And you notice the days working capital drops down in the first 2 years, but it's higher than 45. And then it gradually rebuilds days working capital, and it ends up at 158 days of working capital at the end of the period, and a cumulative increase of 66.9%. We're going to back up and go back through these and answer any questions, so you don't got to memorize everything. The third one I'm going to call the flat smile, and that's because it starts higher at the beginning, it drops down, and then it kind of comes back up a little bit. It's not really happy, it's just kind of a flat smile. So 10%, 10%, then 6.7, 7.5, 8, and 9. The cumulative increase is 63.4%. The days working capital at the end is 104. It's not as high as the other one, which was 158. And the fourth one is returning to 180 days working capital. We're a day shy, let's call it a rounding. But predictably, this one it ends with the highest number of days working capital at the end. It also has the highest cumulative increase at just shy of 71%, right? And the increases in the first 2 years are the same, 10 and 10, because we gotta keep above 45 days working capital, and then it starts building up from there. Now those show you kind of cumulative percentages. Let me show it again in dollars These are looking at the average bill. So this is the 9,000 gallon per month bill for a single family residential customer. So in the no buffer alternative, right, everybody starts off at the same place, $59.56. The no buffer alternative, it goes to $65.52, $72.07, and note that that's the same in all the alternatives, right? The first 2 years were the same in all of those. It's the later years where you're going to see the differences. So alternative 1, it goes to $76.91, and then $81.85, and so forth, up to $92.30 at the end of that period. Cumulative increase of 55%. At the high end of the spectrum, this returning to 180, it goes up to $101.72 at the end of the period, or a cumulative increase of just over 70%. So let's pause here, and I'm happy to go back to any of these, answer any questions. The hard questions I'll give to Ernie, and no, but please let's take some time and see what your thoughts are.
So Dave, just to clarify, so all of these alternatives are to stay below 10% per fiscal year and allow for a drop down to 45 days.
Every one of them is 10% or less per year, and it does drop to below 60 in the first couple of years, but never less than 45.
So this is assuming you still agree with that and don't prefer to stick with the 60 days.
Your input, I mean, I think you made clear your input, but I don't have those alternatives to put up in front of you tonight.
Okay.
So,
But thank
I
you
think
for the
I
input
think
on that.
Yeah, the input from this group is very clear about that.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I think where we want to focus now, Dana, I mean, just to kind of transition the point, comes to, well, what types of, do any of these cumulative increase numbers cause pain? Right? Like, wow, that's a lot of money. That's a big increase over 5.5 years, could be one reaction. And when you look at the days working capital that you end up with at the end, you know, that's really what we're balancing here. I will say that for you to think about, to stay above 60 days in the first couple of years, instead of a 10% increase in the first year, it's going to be 14.4%. That would be the number.
Dave, the numbers are, I mean, it's like $9 difference between the lowest and the top one. Concern would be after 2029 to maintain that level of, say, 180 days or whatever, yeah, or close to it. My question would be, what would it take to maintain that level after that? Because we're going to cause some pain in the next 6 years. Does it go back down a little bit, or do we have to maintain it?
So what I would say is just a starting point for that thought process, Dean, is think about, to maintain, all other things being equal, to maintain the status quo, you need to raise rates each and every year at least at the rate of inflation. Otherwise, you're going backwards, right? So that just gets you status quo. So I'll put that out as kind of the starting point for discussion on that. Good question. Other thoughts here?
Cynthia, go ahead.
I guess my only concern with, and I'll say it, alts 2, 3, and 4, is right now we don't have a good projection that has either come out of UHERO or Council of Revenues or anybody else regarding inflation and how everything, all the other inflatables that a family is getting hit with is affecting them to put a lot of an additional burden on top of them. And I understand it's only $9 difference in fiscal year 2029 between Alt 1 and Alt 4, but in the position that I'm in right now, I've been providing rent and utility relief, mortgage utility relief for the past 2 to 3 years. And I will tell you that it has, for a lot of our families, that has become more and more difficult to meet. I just launched a kupuna rental only subsidy program. And I will tell you, out of the first 20 clients, 11 of them make less than 30% of the area median income. And they've got to survive on that. Rent, all utilities, food, medications, everything else. And then to throw inflation on top of that, I don't know if it's a special class that we're going to have to deal with, or whether that's going to be reflective of a larger portion of the population. But I know that's the numbers I face every day. So, I mean, for myself and my mom, I can go with any of these. I mean, and again, it's just because of where I'm at in life, where she's at in life, what we've done to get to where we're at, to be comfortable. But I see so many families that come through the programs that I'm administering that are just really struggling already, much less with the current inflation on top of it, and then us to add to that.
Yep.
So I'm having a real difficult internal debate with myself as to how we can approach this without causing more hurt to people in general and or these specific classes that are already struggling. And these are the ones, whereas, we're grumbling about, oh God, everybody's moving to the mainland, or they're going here and they're going there because it's cheaper and whatever. Unfortunately, the ones I'm dealing with are probably never going to have the resources to go anywhere else. They got to sit here, face it, and we're going to tell them, oh, by the way, we're going to knock you back on your butt even harder by taking your water from $60 to $100.
Yeah, so let's keep in mind, right, we're talking about 9,000 gallons per month. We are going to have an affordability conversation coming up next. Before we move to that, I want to see what other input there is on this. Yeah, Alice.
Okay, so from the permitted interaction group, so the goal is never less than 45 days. What was the other guidepost? Because ours was 60, right, and 180. Is the goal 180 with this?
No, there was not a goal to get to 180 expressed by the permitted interaction group at this point. I will say that there was not comfort. There was not comfort at keeping it way down low at 60 days. The input from the permitted interaction group was that really doesn't provide the flexibility that they felt the board needs, and so they were not in support of that. Other thoughts here? Yeah, Guy.
I don't disagree with Cynthia, but I think for people who employ people, our minimum wage is going up $2 an hour every 2 years for the next, 2 more cycles, I believe, right? So it's just kind of unfortunate that things are escalating and costs are escalating, for employers and homeowners, and there is no simple answer, but people will be making a higher wage as mandated by the government.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on this? Yeah, Dean.
Just quick comment in that, is inflation taken into account for this?
Yeah, the rates of inflation that have been assumed in the rate model at this point, they start at 4.5% and gradually drop down to 3.5 or 3% per year by the end of the period. So it assumes a downward trend, and that these high numbers that we've been experiencing over the past year or so won't continue at that level. Good question. Okay, let me show you what the permitted interaction group, what they suggested. It was the alternative to getting back on track. Thoughts, reactions, comments? So let me ask a question. Does that, one of the things that you all suggested is, hey, let's make sure that we don't drop below 60 days here. So how this alternative would look different if we implemented that is the first year increase would go to, I think it was 14.4%. The second year is going to need to go a little bit higher, right? We're going to play with those to balance it out and get both of these numbers above 60. And so that would be the change. So I don't know exactly what the cumulative change at the end of the day would be by doing that, but it's going to put it over 70 would be my guess for the cumulative percent change, just for reference. And I don't know how that influences your conversation or not, but that's a rough guess at what those numbers would look like. These are hard issues, right? It's like, ugh. Okay, any other thoughts or comments before I move on? Because I really want to move into the next section, which is about how do we apply this? And we talked at the last meeting about maybe keeping the increases in the essential needs tier lower and shifting some of that burden to the higher water usage tiers. And so I want to spend some time on that. And I mentioned this at the beginning. Recall, we did that indoor efficient water use exercise, and one of the things that you all came away with was the idea that from looking at efficient indoor water use, 10 people in a house, it's pretty hard to use over 15,000 gallons a month. So BWS has taken a look and said, well, where are these high water users? Where are the people, using over 30,000 gallons a month? So this is a heat map, and it's showing usage at 35,000 gallons a month or more. And heat is shown by the brightness of the color. And so the hotter the color, the greater the density of customers using more than 35,000 gallons per month. The cooler the color, down in the blue and purple, the much less dense, okay? And to put some kind of bounds on what that means, think it's not an exact comparison, but that low number where you see purple, you might think about that being between maybe 1 and 6 customers in a square mile using that kind of water. And where you see those hottest colors, that's like in the 60 to 100 customers per square mile using that kind of water. Any surprises, observations?
The low is the people, the floor of this is people using 35,000 gallons a month, and
Yep.
then it just goes up from there.
The floor, yes, the floor is 35,000 gallons per month. It goes up from there. And the colors represent the density of people.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, gotcha.
Dean.
I think I'm surprised at where the hotspots are, because I would have thought it would be in ag areas rather than in
So
the city.
keep in mind, we're looking at single-family residential customers.
Oh, okay.
Right, single-family residential.
Okay.
Yeah, ag customers are going to be way high, but that's not what we're so concerned with here, right? We're talking about 90% of the Board of Water Supply's customers are single-family residential customers. That's where the bang for the buck is in any of these types of actions, right? Cynthia.
The question I have is, so, and we talked about this last time, was for those single-family residential households using more than 35,000 gallons per month, are they multi-generational families? And I know you've said, 10 people in a household will give you no more than about 15,000 gallons of water a month. But some of our households are larger than that, some are smaller. But the other thing is where all of these 35,000 plus gallons per month are. Do we understand why they're using 35,000 gallons per month? Is it because it's water leaks? Is it they're turning their yard into a tropical rainforest? What is it that's causing 35,000 gallons per month? And if it's, and I hate to bring this up, but I mean, California has communities where you're banned to have green lawns. You either do a xeriscape lawn, you do gravel, or you do artificial turf.
So I'm going to ask Kathleen to jump in here because she has sat in front of Google Earth going and looking at some of these dots, and there's a microphone right there, Kathleen.
It's landscaping and swimming pools. That's, if you look at those neighborhoods, oh, I don't need this.
Yeah, you do.
No, I don't. If you look at the neighborhoods, and we actually sat there, Raylyn, Dave, and I sat there, and we went in because we were worried about the multi-generational. And what we've discovered, and Brian and Dyer, our past chair, also confirmed this at our PIG meeting the other day, that a lot of the larger homes, say in Waipahu or Kalihi, where you think multi-generation, they also have multiple incomes. And as you guys also noticed, they don't use 35,000, and usually the lots are full lots. They're like 0 lot lines. They're not lush landscaping. We Googled in, and these were huge lots with swimming pools, very lush landscaping. But what we're doing is we have pulled a list of our top 200, and we're going to go down to 2,000 eventually. And our IT team has come up with this beautiful dashboard that they shared with us that we can go in and pull these people out. And we are going to be doing a targeted effort of reaching out to them and talking to them about exactly what you discussed, about xeriscaping, about using less water, significant plants. But we know exactly where the high water users are, and I'll pull. It's kind of embarrassing when you pull the list and you actually know some of the names on the list. You're like, oh my God. But that's what we're going to be doing. We did really well, and we'll be sharing our customer satisfaction survey with you in October. But our message really went out, unfortunately, due to Red Hill. A lot of people have gotten that conservation message. 65% of the people we surveyed said they are instituting conservation messages. What we need to do now is take it one level. We got to go deeper. We got to really go deeper, and we got to really be super targeted, like you said. But these are the people unfortunately, in high-income neighborhoods that, for whatever reason, it doesn't compute. And we have to find that pressure point to get them to understand that they got to conserve. Thank you.
I got to follow on to that.
Yeah.
Because this is a pet peeve of mine, is the city wants to, how do I make this diplomatic?
You've never bothered before. Why are you going to start this afternoon?
The city wants to put a new tax on every homeowner and every property, and I'm going to call it a tax. If you have a large amount of impervious surface, they want you to have as much pervious surface as possible. So they want to see lawns. They want to see not rocks. They don't want to see house. They don't want to see driveways. They want to see each lot, each TMK, to be able to quote unquote absorb storm water, so that one, we don't have the potential runoffs, And two, they're gonna tax us so that they can go do their job, which is to keep the canals clean, the mouths of the streams open and whatever. So we're playing this,
Yeah.
this this balancing act, and I would hope, and I know this is a lot, but I would hope somewhere along the line, BWS in the city, ENV, or yeah, I guess it's ENV with that stormwater quality stuff, can figure out between the two of you how you're not gonna whack the people upside the head twice.
Good
At
point.
least do half here and half here, but not 2 times.
Good point, and I don't want to delve into a stormwater
No, I
fee
just
discussion
wanna-
tonight, but it's a great point.
This is just a
Yeah.
comment that I hope you guys are looking at that.
Yeah, thank you. It seems to run cross purposes here for what we're trying to accomplish here.
Yeah.
So, good point. Thank you, Cynthia. And the stormwater utility, as far as we know right now, it's not being pushed. But
Not yet, but
what you pointed out is an important discussion we can have with DFM.
And
Yeah.
please do, because I can guarantee you that no water that falls on my lot in Waianae flows off my lot. I actually have pictures where, because I have barriers around the edges of my lot, nothing goes off, but I'm still gonna get nailed if they do this thing. So, and
Yeah.
they could care less.
Thank you.
Can I comment for a moment? I appreciate your comment. I sit on that advisory group as well. And it's not the goal to hit you upside the head. It's not the goal to just tax you. It's not the goal to encourage you to put a lawn in instead of some other pervious surface. So I think, there are good people on that group too, and recognizing that this is a balancing act. And there are a lot of places that aren't responsible the way you are, right? And they'll pave over, their lot, and, you're creating an additional problem. So, I'd suggest let's not demonize each other, and do the kind of, discussing that you're recommending.
And I'm going to call a pause because I want to get back to this.
Yeah, I didn't mean to disparage it, but it's just that whenever I've raised my points, I've always been told, too bad, everybody's gonna be charged the same thing. It doesn't matter whether you allow your property, the water to leave your property or not. It doesn't matter, you're all gonna get taxed
Yeah,
the same way.
they're having similar discussions to what we're having here.
Yeah.
Pervious versus impervious percentage is a part of that discussion, but a part of that discussion is also ability to pay.
So we're going to come back to rate tiers. This is a good discussion, and maybe we need to come up within another meeting coming back to that. So there are 2 alternatives I'm going to show you here. And they are all built around that, getting back to, what did we call it? Sorry. Getting back on track. They're all built around that getting back on track alternative. So 10%, 10%, 9, 8.5, 8, cumulative increase of 66.9%. Now I want you to look down at the bottom, right? So there's the customer charge, right? There's the monthly customer charge. That would go up at those percentages. And then the increases in each of the tiers would go up at those percentages evenly across the board. Every tier sees a 66.9% increase. Every sample bill, the low water user, the median water user, the average, the high, their bills would all go up 66.9% evenly over the period. Now, what if we limited increases and kept the essential needs tier increases lower and shifted the burden to higher tiers? What does that look like? And in this example, I want to focus you down on the bottom. We've limited the increase in the essential needs tier, this is the quantity charge, to 2.5% per year. And we've shifted the burden somewhat to tier 3 and mostly to tier 4. So you see the cumulative increase in the quantity charge in the essential needs tier, the first 2,000 gallons per month, everybody gets the benefit of that, right? It's 16%. Tier 2, they stay on average, right? Tier 3, they go up more than that, and Tier 4 goes up a lot more than that. So when you look at sample bills, let's go to the low water user, 2,000 gallons a month or less. They currently pay $21 a month. At the end of the period, that would go up to $30.52, a cumulative increase of 45.3%. Kathleen?
And then that includes the customer charge, to be clear,
It's the total bill, right? And that's why you see it going up 45% instead of just 16%, because it's got the customer charge increase in it. So total bill. So essential needs tier, 2,000 gallons a month or less. About 10% of BWS's customers use 2,000 gallons a month or less. The median customer, okay, so this, half of BWS's customers use less than 6,000 gallons a month, and half of them use more than 6,000 gallons a month. So let's just say if you were using 6,000 gallons a month, you currently pay $42, and over this period of time, that would go up to $65.58, or a total increase of 56.1%. It's below, note that it's below the 66.9% number, right? So even those customers are getting the benefit of the lower increase in the essential needs tier. The average water bill, 9,000 gallons per month, they currently pay just under $60. That would go up to $97.80. The cumulative increase is 64.2%. It's still less than the cumulative, if we applied it evenly, of 66.9, right? Because everybody's getting the benefit of that lower cost on the first 2,000 gallons. When we start to get into quantities around $12,000 or $13,000 a month, 12 or 13,000 gallons per month, that's when it kind of evens out. And then usage above that are the highest water users, right? They're going to see an increase in their total bill. For somebody using 35,000 gallons a month, they currently pay $228 a month for that bill. Over the time, that would go up to $413.49. What are your thoughts about that shifting of the burden? Calvin's smiling and nodding his head, but I'm not sure why, because we just met. So tell me.
I kind of like it from a consumer standpoint. I think it'll help shape some of the habits and incentivize people to change some of the habits to aspire to those and stay below in those low to median ranges.
Okay. Others? John's got a bit of a scowl, so.
So for those above the average of 9,000, the high 35, what percentages of users hit that high mark?
Okay, so the average water bill, 9,000 gallons per month. 2/3 of BWS's customers, 60% or so, use 9,000 gallons a month or less. So the majority of customers are going to see a lower increase under this scenario than if we had applied the increase uniformly across all the tiers.
They're trying to save water or increase revenue?
Well, all these are revenue neutral. They all generate the same amount of revenue, right? We're just shifting the tier that we're using to generate that revenue. Right. So the point is to encourage conservation amongst the highest users and send a stronger price signal.
My gut feeling is they're just going to pay for it. The higher users are going to continue to pay for it, so
could be.
That's going to generate more revenue. I mean, it's gonna generate revenue.
It generates more from them,
Right.
but it's offset by less revenue for the lower water users. Uh-huh.
But are we also trying to save water? I mean, why not limit how much water they can use? If we're trying to save water, let's limit how much water they can use.
Okay.
Like, we're talking two different subjects here. And it, the average of 9,000, but the high of 35. What about anybody using over 9,000, or anybody say using 10,000 and up? Has to pay some particular rate that's just set anywhere between 10,000 and 35,000. You pay the highest amount.
Okay. What do others
Am I
think about what John's saying?
I don't know. The hot spots really bother me. They bother the hell out of me. I'm sorry, but we all grew up on this island, and we know exactly where those hot spots are going to be. I don't get invited to their houses for parties.
That's really the issue, right? I'm teasing you.
It gets into that conversation, and
You use your mic. Yeah. Thank you, Mark.
Similar conversations have been had, with fuel use and burning fossil fuels. At what point, do you really start ramping the rate for high users? Thank you. At what point do you really start ramping the rate for high users to the point where it goes beyond that they'll just pay it, right? And it causes behavior change. I think we've had those conversations on and off throughout the 8 or more years we've been together. And, I'm kind of with John looking at that 35,000 gallons or more per month group. And yeah, I think they'll just not even bat an eyelash at paying $200 more a month in 2009 and just keep going for it. And so I don't, would they change behavior if it was, their rate went up to 1,000 a month for 35,000 gallons? I don't know. Maybe that's a survey question for them. And then do you send out Rick Barbosa and his crew to show them how to zero-escape or do better planting? But I'm interested in, and I'll pause for just, I'm interested in if there's a way to figure out, in effect, a penalty rate and what would cause behavior change, particularly in the highest users.
Okay. Other thoughts on this?
And criminalizing. I mean,
and criminalizing.
With that too.
Okay. Yeah, John.
Marine Corps Base Hawaii, we're not including residential use there. I don't see that as a hotspot.
No, these are BWS specific customers.
Are they
Marine Corps
not?
bases. BWS sells the base water, but those people pay that water system, right?
The Marine Corps is responsible to pay the bill. I don't know. I don't think they charge their. It doesn't seem like they're metered individually, like by housing unit.
Okay, so are they paying their fair share nonetheless, as a whole, Marine Corps Base Hawaii? Are they paying, according to this kind of a schedule?
I think because they have a lot of industrial type of uses, they're probably on a non-residential rate as opposed to a single family, because they're not a single family customer or a multi-unit customer.
Okay.
A residential customer.
Kind of looking at Barry because we've been talking about what they're.
We just met with the new commander of the base, and we talked about water conservation. We talked about getting on recycled wastewater, and they told us that that's the #1 project priority for the whole Marine Corps nationwide right now, is that reuse R1 project that they have.
Okay.
Good questions.
But John, I think you were talking maybe about tier shifting or redefining where the tiers transition to that highest user, highest rate.
Right.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Keep in mind that one of the things that this group had a lot of input to last time around when we were setting those tiers, right? And you recall we added an essential needs tier last time around, and we also we shifted the tiers down to be able to send a stronger conservation signal. There was a big balance in that discussion about making sure that we don't negatively impact low-income multi-generational households, and therein lies the trade-off, right? And so it's a delicate point. Your point's well taken. I want to see if there's any other thoughts on this. Does that look like a reasonable shift? Helen.
Have you ever talked to psychologists about what?
I'm not that messed up. Come on.
You know, we're using money as the incentive for change in behavior, right? This is what I think. But have you people ever asked a group of psychologists or psychiatrists or whoever what they think about what makes people change their behavior?
You know, that's a good question. Maybe it's like a behavioral scientist or something. How to influence behavior? No, we haven't. But thank you for the idea, Hannah. Yeah.
Okay, let me show you the permitted interaction group input on that. They kind of liked that tier shift, keeping the essential needs tier increases much lower and really shifting that burden, especially to the highest usage tier. As a result of that, here's the specific proposal that the board is planning on going out to broader public outreach with. You've seen a lot of it already. I just wanted to quickly walk you through it. Ernie has been mentioning the balance slide, right? And it's important. This is all a balance between ensuring the adequacy and dependability of the water system and balancing that against affordability considerations. There's really 5 elements that the board's considering in that, and you've seen this. The first one is continuing to defer less critical infrastructure projects like some of those pipeline replacements. The second one is focusing on water quality, source protection, and replacement or treatment of impacted sources. The third is keeping a pretty flat O&M budget. The fourth is initiating the Water Master Plan update in this current fiscal year. And the last element, recognizing that it's a flat O&M budget and there isn't a lot of wiggle room, is adjusting the day's working capital upward to account for those trends and risks. That looks like this series of increases, which you've seen already before, a cumulative amount of 66.9%. Keep in mind, we have a tiered rate structure. We talked about what those current rates are already. Here's what they would go up to in each of the tiers. You were just looking at this in a previous slide, so no change from what you saw before. The monthly customer charge would go up at that cumulative amount of 66.9%. And keep in mind that single-family residential customers, almost all of them have 5/8 or 3/4 inch meters and pay the lowest charge. So for the low water user, the bill is currently $21 and a penny per month. That would go up to just over $30, an increase of $9.51 over the period, or cumulatively 45.3%. Kathleen?
Can you explain what the percentages mean at the bottom?
Yeah, that's the amount it goes up each year.
Many percentages, it's all different.
Yeah, this is the amount that it goes up each year. So in the first year, it would go up 6.8. The bill amount would go up 6.8%. In the next year, the bill amount would go up 6.9%, and so on and so forth. This is the median bill. 50% of all single-family residential customers use less than this amount. Their bill is less. 50%, their bill is higher. The increases there per year are shown. In total, this bill goes up by about $23.57 per month. Kathleen?
Sorry, I think it came here, but could you go back to the first one? And this is because there's a lot of percentages, and we have to go out and also talk about this. So if it's a 2.5% increase, that's on the water rates. This is the cumulative between water rates and the customer charge?
This is the total bill.
And that's why it's 6.8, not 2.5%.
That's right. Going to the average water user, they currently pay just under $60 a month. That would go to $97.80 per month, an increase of $38.24, or cumulatively 64.2%. The annual increases are shown below. And the high water user here again, that bill goes up 80.8% over the period, peaking out at $413.49. Of course, there's plenty of users in the system that are using more than 35,000 gallons a month, and they're going to pay even more. Multi-unit residential, it's similar in the tier structure. So we've applied the changes similarly. So keeping the essential needs tier at 2.5% per month, 2.5% per year, and applying the increases to the tiers, just like we did in single-family residential. You can see the changes in the quantity charges here. Non-residential customers, they all pay the same rate, right, regardless of the amount of usage. That's currently $5.27 per thousand. That would go up over the period to $8.80 per thousand gallons, an increase of $3.53. Total increase, 66.9%. Those subsidies for the low rates for agricultural customers, they currently pay only 60% of their cost of service, and recycled and non-potable customers also pay less than their cost of service. Those same subsidies would remain. The rate structure for agricultural customers would stay the same. The increases would be in the tiers for agricultural customers. Again, the essential needs tier stays down at 2.5% increase per year. Tier 2 at 66.9, and then the third tier is a little bit higher, but overall these bills are increasing pretty flat, right? 66.9 on average. It's a flat increase across all of these other rates. Again, these are all currently paying below their cost of service, and it would stay that way. There are waivers for meter charges and the water system facilities charge for affordable housing and for homeless housing units. It's proposed to continue to provide those waivers. There are also currently waivers in place on the meter charge for fire sprinkler retrofits. It's proposed to continue those fee waivers. The board is considering waivers of the water system facilities charge and the meter charge for new agricultural customers with a 3/4 or 1-inch meter. So these are the smaller farmers. These are people who are connecting to the system for the first time, starting out in their business. It would be limited to the $1 million that was granted to BWS by the state a couple of years back. I think you all probably remember that. And proof of a commercial agricultural operation and a water use plan would be required to get this. Not particularly onerous. And there's new water conservation programs that are being considered. Kathleen already mentioned outreach to the top water users, including businesses, condos, townhomes. And then looking at a direct install program for Kupuna living on their own. This would be based on referrals from other agencies that work with seniors, provide water audits, low water use fixtures for free, and then for other rebates available from the BWS to ensure that they are taking advantage of those where possible. Keep in mind we have some other charges that I don't want to dig into detail on, but there's a fire meter standby charge that would go up uniformly. The standby charge for emergency interconnections, that's rarely implemented. It's at the discretion of the manager. The water system facilities charges, no changes proposed to that at this time. And then these cost adjustment fees for power cost adjustment and environmental regulations that are already in place, those would stay the same. BWS rarely implements those things. And finally, the schedule for rate adoption. We are here in the July to September 2023 timeframe looking at public input on this draft proposal. You all have been with us all the way through all of the analyses leading up to this and looking at the board to consider new rate adoption in the September-October timeframe of this year. There are community information meetings coming up. There's 3 of them in August, the 14th, the 15th, and the 16th. BWS would love your participation at any of those. And finally, for the public to submit comments on this rate proposal, here are the dates. Hope to get all input by the end of September. People can email, they can call, they can send a carrier pigeon, right? So that's what's going on with the rate proposal. Let me just say thank you and a couple orders of business. We sent out meeting notes from meeting 46. I know, as always, you diligently looked at them, reviewed them. Any corrections, comments on those notes? Okay, seeing none, we'll consider those adopted. And Ernie, we're at the end of our time, but I'd be remiss to not give you the opportunity to provide any updates.
Go ahead, Cynthia.
Just one thing to add to the presentation, because this came up at the Nanakuli-Miley Neighborhood Board meeting Tuesday night. We had a board member who knows better, but was talking about how the city budget was, I don't know, commingled, if you will, with Board of Water Supply, and she heard about the Board of Water Supply rate increases and was going off about, you know, the city does this, that, and the other thing, and BWS is part of the city, you know, you guys should be managing the entire city budget and what have you. I think there needs to be at least a definition that says Board of Water Supply is separate from the city. All of its functions is separate from the city. They're not commingled. And then the other thing that was brought up was, why is the single family home charges so much higher than agriculture? So you remember that one that she came up with? So we need to, I think, in the presentation, especially, and this person should know better, but I'm thinking for people who are not as familiar with how the Board of Water Supply looks at things as far as single family home, multifamily, agriculture, whatever, that we need to put maybe a one-liner in that says the reason why we look at agriculture with such favorable costs are because, one, they use a lot more water, and two, there's a major benefit to everybody.
Food security.
So I'm just raising that because I was on virtually and I was just listening to poor Irwin getting lambasted on Tuesday, and I'd prefer BWS be prepared for that in case there are other people out there that might have similar misconceptions of the interconnectivity between BWS and the city, not understanding you're semi-autonomous, you do your own budgets, you don't intermingle, you know, things of that sort, so that it's very clear. Because the other thing that was also brought up, which the Nanakuli-Miley Neighborhood Board will have to take up in the future again, is the sewer bill on the BWS bill and why it's so high. We've been there, done that, had that meeting more than once, but it still continues to be brought up. So I just want you guys, as you put these things together, make sure you have something in your back pocket.
Yeah, thank you, Cynthia. I know, no, those are excellent suggestions, and we're going to take you up on that. Thank you. Let's move on, though. Okay. Any other closing comments or remarks? I just wanted to give you a quick update on the Red Hill situation. So there are 2 efforts that are underway. You know, one is defueling, and that is the responsibility of the something called the JTF, Joint Task Force. They started on Monday to defuel 4 above-ground storage tanks, what they call surge tanks, near Pearl Harbor, and then there's about 480,000 gallons of fuel. And I think they're on track to maybe completely empty out those tanks by the end of this week, so maybe within 1 week of that 480,000. And they're moving it to other tanks on the base. The next step they're going to do is they've finished all the repairs of the pipelines, and they're only going to use 2 of the 3 pipelines, not all of it. Their next step would be to repack or fill those pipelines with fuel and be able to start to gravity drain the 14 or so tanks that contained 104 million gallons of fuel out of Red Hill. They're targeting starting that whole defueling effort, defueling by gravity, they call it by gravity, which is just open the valves and let it flow from uphill, downhill to Pearl Harbor, starting around mid-October and being finished by mid-January of this year. It will still leave between 100,000 to 400,000 gallons of fuel still in low points in the pipeline or sludge coming out of the tanks or in the pipes, and that won't be removed for at least minimum of 3+ years until they have decided as part of closure to remove all 3 large pipelines connecting the tanks to Pearl Harbor, which is a positive thing. Concern I have is 3+ years to do that, and that's still a heck of a lot of fuel that potentially could be over our drinking water aquifer. So the faster they can get it out, the better. I would actually advocate that the Joint Task Force, JTF, stay in operation to completely take every single drop of fuel out of Red Hill, instead of passing that to back to the Navy. And letting Navy take care of it. But remember, all those screw-ups and human errors and contractor errors occurred under Navy contracts. So there's some concern, and I think that concern is being reflected back to Washington, D.C. But that's the status right now. They are, hopefully we'll be able to accomplish this without any more spills. But what I'm going to be telling the community, and I'll be going on Spotlight next month, is the story doesn't end there. Defueling the facility is just part of the story. The other part is remediation. Understanding what's happened in the aquifer, where the fuel that's been released over the life of the facility, and our best estimate is at a minimum of 180,000 gallons. But some new information is kind of indicating it might be even more. We're trying to get more clarification on that. But remediate that, clean up the aquifer, clean up the area between the bottoms of the tanks and the top of the water table where we think there's a whole lot of fuel from the 80-year history of this facility still stuck in the rocks there above our water table. And it constantly going to be dripping that fuel back into the groundwater every time it rains heavy up at Red Hill. So that's the remediation is going to be the long-term effort that we don't want the Navy to ease up on their efforts, but continue to follow through until all the VI is restored. Anyway, that's the update on Red Hill. So it is a lot going on right now. We have to watch Congress very carefully to see what's happening there. So thank you. Any questions?
This is a wild thought, but have you experimented with Genki balls?
Alawai Canal, Genki balls. Yeah, they are talking about things called bioremediation, so naturally trying to introduce bacteria or other things that would help to eat up, have the bacteria eat up the fuel. That's going to be probably one of the options.
Can work? I mean, have you tried?
We haven't tried Genki balls and fuel, but remember the fuel is actually not in a pool of fuel. It's more likely in the cracks and crevices of the lava rock and the pore spaces of lava rock, and that's the challenge. Like getting So you take a sponge, and instead of a soft sponge, you have a sponge that is made out of rock, and the fuel saturated that. How do you get it out of there? And it's going to be challenging. I don't know if we'll ever get all of the fuel out of there, out of the environment. Yeah. But other questions, and thank you for staying so long. And I appreciate your feedback. I really struggle between the issue of affordability and I'll tell you, I still remember the last time we increased water rates, and we also changed our billing system. Talking to a kupuna in the lobby of the Board of Water Supply, and that lady was in tears and asking me, what do I do? Do I pay my utilities? Do I pay for water? Or do I pay for food? And I hope never to put people in that situation, but I understand and appreciate your support to give the Board of Water Supply adequate funding to do our mission, and that's very important. But it's the balance also with affordability for our customers when they're also struggling. So hopefully taking the smallest increases on the essential needs tier, which was designed to help those on fixed incomes, small families that use very little water, to have that being the least amount of increases. But the people that are large water users, trying to incentivize them to paying the bigger bill to cut back on their use. But John, those people probably have incomes way more than the kupuna that are struggling. So the other thing is education. Trying to educate people to be environmentally responsible, to be good stewards of our water resources. Because we live on an island, we can't afford to abuse the aina, to abuse the water. We need to treat it like a gift and care for it. So thank you, everybody, for tonight.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you. Our next meeting is here back at the Blaisdell Center on Thursday, October 19th. Look forward to seeing you all then. Thank you.